Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Uncommon Sense number 95. Now, if you're an avid listener, you should be scratching your head at this point in time because last week, Dean and I may have done Uncommon Sense number 96 on succession planning. So for those of you who are thinking, oh, today I'm going to join and hear about succession planning, it's already happened. That was 96. This is 95, where we're actually going to debrief some of the quarterly review work that Dean's done with some of his coaching clients. It's called Uncommon Sense because nothing is common about
So
uncommon sense.
it was a little bit of a rookie error, Craig, at the end of the day, that we clicked on the wrong button, looked at the list and saw that we were meant to talk about 96 and succession planning. Had all these people excited to get ready to come and hear about succession planning. As you said, that's in the past now, and it's available on our YouTube channel if you want to jump in and watch that as well. But we are in the nervous 90s, Craig, so that's probably a little bit of the reason as to why. So we're lining everything up for our 100th episode towards the middle of December. So stay tuned for a little bit of fun on that one.
Correct. And the reality is, everyone, you got to own your mistakes. It's better to just say, you know what, we stuffed up and put it out there than try and make it work any other way. What I can say was 96 was exceptional. 95 could be even better. So let's roll with 95 today. Obviously, one of the things you do in your other role, Dean, when you're not hosting this leading podcast that we have, is you do a lot of coaching and a lot of coaching with advice firms, obviously. And part of that process is a quarterly review, which is a really key part to ensure people are staying accountable and that type of thing. I know you've recently done that, and we thought what a great idea to unpack some of the key themes that might be coming from that so that we can share some of those with people. And if you take one or two things from this that you can go and embed yourself to make things a little bit better, then we'll consider that job done for number 95. But I want to start with the pulse check, Dean. We talk about building a business pulse check. Why don't you take our listeners through that? What does that mean? What are we doing with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that happens as we continue to build our business is that we obviously make improvements over time, but we don't really necessarily measure how the business owners are feeling in terms of their confidence, in terms of how the business is changing. And also, frankly, we forget all the great things that we've done over time as well. And so what we've done in terms of building this pulse check is it ends up being about 20 questions that the business owner goes through ahead of quarterly planning to gauge how they're feeling about their business as it stands today. And so if you imagine you do this quarter, next quarter, and next quarter, hopefully we're improving the score over time in terms of how we're feeling about the business. But also sometimes we go 2 steps forward and 1 step back because we become harder markers over time as well, that we want more in those. So therefore we might mark ourselves down. So the results end up being a framework for having discussions with the businesses about how they're feeling about the progress they are making and also what they need to focus on for the next 90 days and beyond. And so the scorecard falls into essentially 4 categories of things that we like to talk about. And the first one is plan. So how is the business feeling about their vision and strategy today in terms of what they've documented and what they're executing on? And there's a score out of 26 for that. And so you might have got 9, for example, in that. So you get an idea of where you're sitting at that term in terms of your plan and vision. Second category of questions ends up being processes. So understanding how you can objectively rate the current level of processes within your business. How's the operational team going? And get a score for that as well. Next category is people. So making sure you've got processes, you need people to run those processes. And so making sure we're getting a score for our team and culture through that process as well. So we understand how everyone's going and how everyone's feeling at that point in time. And then finally, there's a profit question. So profit is a bit more detail about how you're feeling about the charging of clients. Do clients get charged consistently? Is that the right fee? Are we getting the right return on investment as owners? And so all of those questions roll up to a score as well. And so we get this pulse check of those 4 key categories, which is plan, process, people, and profit. And we're able to then see that score and assess it and obviously aim to improve it over time. And so this is on our website. Anyone can actually log in and do it, Craig. So it's not just the score itself is not just for our clients. So anyone can jump on the website and do the process of answering these questions and getting the score. And definitely it's going to allow them to reflect on what they should be focusing on in their business, depending on the score. Then you diving into the detail of going, how can I actually improve each and every one of those? And so this is run off a program called Score App. And so jump online, do the questionnaire, get your own results, and then take action off the back of it. But it was a really good insight for our clients to see how they are assessing themselves. And it wasn't necessarily all rainbows and unicorns. There's some numbers there that everyone was taking away going, oh, actually, now that I've objectively looked at it, I want to improve over the next 90 days and 12 months to improve elements of my business that maybe I wasn't really focused on at this point in time.
So, Dean, how do you stop people? Because you give me a scorecard, I'm just working through it, and I think that's pretty good. That's a 10. My support staff think it's a 2 because I'm being blasted. So, how do you encourage people to actually score this thing properly?
So two things. So you raised an interesting point, maybe accidentally or maybe very intelligently, Craig.
Let's go with accidentally.
Let's go. Noted. So first and foremost, you don't have to be the only one that does the questionnaire for your business. And so if you do have people within your business, you can ask them to do the score as well and compare the answers. And so the answers from an owner's perspective might be different to an employee's perspective, first and foremost. So it would be good to do it like that and then contrast from that perspective. And then the second thing is the trend over time, because the thing about entrepreneurs and business owners is they're hard markers on themselves. Yep. And so as a result, no one gets 10s because everyone is trying to build something new and grow and move up. And so that's the challenge, is not just in the getting the score towards 10, but it's actually using as a motivation for if it's low because you're a hard marker and you've got to do something about it to move forward.
Yep. All right. Good call. All right. Let's move on. One of the sayings I think we've talked about before, it was maybe in the E-Myth or something like that, the system runs the business and the people run the system. Which leads to one you've got here around, I guess, process. And you talk about making process your product, which I think links to that saying as well. So why don't you take us through that part of what you discussed?
Yeah, so we went through a couple of elements, and so the process library or the way of operating starts from the front end. And so one of the insights that we want to leave all the listeners with is that, firstly, clients don't actually know what the journey is of working with a financial advisor for 12 months. They think you do this, they think you do that, but they don't really understand the entire journey that they're going to go on. And so first and foremost, understanding that in your business about what you want to deliver to a client over 12 months is almost step one. Then turning that into the product that you sell to clients as to what it's going to be like working with me for 12 months. It's really important in those first interactions with clients to let them know what the journey is of that 12-month period, but because that's confirming what type of relationship that you want to have with that client. It can be sometimes a surprise to a client. I know that I had a doctor once and he was expecting me to solve everything immediately in the meeting. He got his pen and paper out and he was ready to take down the answers to his problems because he thought I could solve them immediately. And so if I had told the client, this is the entire process that we do over 12 months, it would have changed the meeting because he wouldn't be expecting answers, and he would know that I have to go away and do certain things in order to get those answers. And so making sure that we're telling clients that it's a 12-month journey, making sure that we've turned that 12-month journey into some type of product, if it's a wealth mentor program or a strategy advice program or something like that, we've turned it into something so clients can almost look and feel what it is like to work with you for 12 months. And then it's dropping down underneath there to say that now, once we know that, there's a consistent operating rhythm of the business. And so there's plenty of sayings, but one way, same way in terms of what each of the businesses want is that each client journey is somewhat identical in the process. Obviously, every client's different, so every outcome is different. But the steps that you go through should and can be identical for the vast majority of clients. And focusing the business on building the best way and the way, we just wanted to reinforce and constantly reinforce in businesses, because that's our operational leverage. The fact that we can document our processes and they be followed by all, and followed by each tier of person within the business, is really key. And if you've got the goal of going from one advisor to two advisors at any point in time, we don't want that second advisor going rogue, which is essentially inventing their own processes because you haven't documented yours yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
So any advisor without a process will just find their own process. Secondly, advisors are a little bit like water, that they'll always find the fastest way to do everything. And so if you want it done in a consistent way, it has to be documented, and the team has to do a lot of work to make sure that those business processes are followed over time.
It's a funny one, Dean, because I see this all the time, right? You've got the business owners who are typically the advisors, and you say to them, so you've got consistent, let's say there's two of them, right?
Yeah.
You've got consistent systems and processes. Oh, absolutely. Get them out of a room, bring their support team in and ask them the same question, and their eyes roll back in their head and they go, nah, Dean does something different to Craig. Craig gives me this at this part of the process. Dean gives it to me at that part of the process. But Craig and Dean think everything's amazing,
Everything's
right?
rosy. You're exactly right. It happened with my business partner as well.
There you go. So how do you get that out of the business? And then the secondary question to that, mate, is how do you encourage discipline around building a process when there's so many shiny new toys coming at people all the time?
Yeah. So for the first thing that we did for the differences in the processes is, obviously we've got to make it a team process, not an I process. And then what needed to happen for the change, like the cultural change between the two advisors, is that whenever there was a desire to deviate from the path, those two people had to go to the side, nut out the way, and then agree on one way. So Paul and I, in our example, we had to lock ourselves in a room and nut out the issue so that we could agree there was going to be one way going forward. And so going through that iteration was key. The reason why we had to go into the room is we built the culture that the staff were only going to follow the way that was documented through that process. And that solved a little bit of the deviations, because you had to go away and talk about it through that process. What was the second part of the question?
The second part was, with all these shiny new toys out and about in the marketplace now, like this system does this, program can do that. Like, how do you work with the firm for them to bring a level of discipline so they don't get actually caught in trying a million things and getting nowhere, versus actually just bringing discipline to it?
Yeah, so the discipline, so there are plenty of, so if we're talking about the process library, there are a variety of tools to help you build that process library quicker and easier now than what there was a few years ago. The first thing is committing around, I need to build it. The second thing is making sure that we're documenting the process library in the right location so that everyone can see it, use it, and it's followed by all through that perspective. And this curse of the bright shiny toy needs to be delayed with a business planning process. So when you've decided that you're building a process library, if there's then changes in your design, changes in the process, i.e. we're going to bring new technology in, that decision can only happen at quarterly planning in terms of what I teach. And so therefore, we're trying to minimize the distractions during any 90-day period. And if you want to pitch me your AI tool to help run a process or do something faster, the only time that you can pitch that to me is at quarterly planning.
Yep. Okay.
And so that avoids the intra-month or inter-quarter distractions that happen with advisors, because respectfully, a BDM calls halfway through the quarter with something, and because it sounds amazing, you meet with them, you do all these things, and we end up distracting ourselves from what we set out the intentions at the start of the quarter.
Yeah, and is it fair to say, I think sometimes people are looking for these solutions because they're coming all the time without actually having a process library first.
Yes, sometimes, absolutely.
You know,
Like, you got to
got
know
to
what's
get right.
broken before you need to know what's broken before you add another thing on top of it. And typically, the reality is that I have the saying of, oh, Microsoft does that, or I could even say Xplan does that. So people go and seek solutions, or they get solutions sold to them. But I'd flip it around and go, did you know Microsoft did that particular thing relatively well, or did you try an Xplan first before you went and bought something else external? It's definitely making sure that you're doing it internal first, but the team should be identifying the processes that need the enhancement, not necessarily the advisor.
Yeah, I like it. So let's go to AI now. It's there, it's out there. I remember we were at the Future Proof conference together, and you kept hearing quotes like, be the editor, not the author. Use these systems, but it's AI stands for artificial intelligence. So how do you take artificial intelligence and kind of humanize that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one of the themes that we were talking through at quarterly planning was just thinking about the role of the human versus the role of the AI, and just reassuring and confirming that at the end of the day, for the foreseeable future, and I will be wrong at some point in time, but human-led advice is going to be desired for the vast majority that can afford to pay it. There'll be a subcategory of people that will accept automated advice, and that will move up the scale through this process. But if you think about your strategic financial advice as a service, there are always people willing to pay for a service, even though that they could do it themselves. Okay.
Yeah.
Think about pool cleaning. Everyone with a pool theoretically can clean their own pool, and yet there's plenty of pool cleaners. So, because it's a service, and people are trading time and money through that equation, and that will still happen in the future. So, making sure that we're focusing on the fact that humans will lead the advice process. AI is going to come behind and support us through that process is key, as opposed to AI coming to replace the front end financial advisor. We confirmed at this point in time that AI is an assistant, that it is aiding every staff member to do tasks. It's not yet doing whole things without the advisor involvement and the advisor looking. Through that discussion, we want to focus the client communication on making sure that the human at the front of the process, or humans within the business, are doing lots of the hand holding and support, because that's the bit the clients are actually going to value being delivered by a human.
Yeah.
The second component, Craig, that we highlighted is that the AI bots, so ChatGPT and the community of those underneath it, they're actually, as we know, scraping information off websites in order to present that back to a client. Anthony, in one of our businesses, was being interviewed by a new potential client, and that potential client had used ChatGPT to generate a list of questions to ask her potential advisor. So she was going through a process of interviewing 2 advisors, and she had prepared those questions using AI. So that's a really interesting future state, that clients are going to come much more prepared, and they have been over the years much more prepared to talk to you using these tools to generate questions. But the question becomes, where is the tool getting the information from, and how are they presenting it? And so AI is scraping all of the websites. And so one of the things that we called out is that your website, and we talked to Lisa Greensill about that as well, like, your website is and was designed for a human reading it. However, we also need to think about how the websites are being designed for AI to read it. So we know if you put a query into ChatGPT and the like, it's going to give you an answer, and it's going to give you resources or source documents that it actually went to pull out those answers. And as people get more sophisticated with using AI, essentially what they're going to do is read the answer, look at the source documents, and click on one of them. And so you want to be that firm that is the source documents, because then people are going to go onto your website because AI told them to go on the website, not because you've done search engine optimization or all of that jazz. It's simply because your website gave excellent information to an AI engine that answered client questions that the human was asking of AI.
It's a real shift, isn't it? Like
It's
that
a very
whole
big shift.
SEO marketing completely changes. It's a whole new way of getting information.
And
For
the
yourself.
data's real, Craig. So we have some of our websites built on a program called WIX.
Yeah.
And so I can go into the back end of Wix today, and it's actually giving me a report on how many people have been to my website. It's been that in itself has been around for years. What the more important thing is how many queries on AI have been done on the same period. So the stats for one of our websites, for example, is there's been over the last 30 days, there's been 436 people on the website. Now, if they click on it for a second, it counts. But importantly, there's been 329 AI queries on the website as well. And at different times, it's been the numbers have been a bit closer. So what I've been watching is that half the traffic to our website is AI. And so we need to think about that differently to what a human might look at versus what an AI would look at. And the volume of questions that AI is looking, or the answers, is much bigger. And so the big action for us as a result of that was to build out essentially quite a detailed frequently asked questions as one solution. It's not for clients to read, it's for AI to read. So it's still going to be on the website. You could theoretically navigate to it, but it's designed for AI to be reading, not for humans to be reading.
Clever. All right, let's move on, Dean. You're doing a quarterly planning day. I'm assuming people are setting some goals off the bat, given it's a planning day. But if I had $1 million or even $1 actually for every time I saw someone write a goal and then actually go back to work and do nothing about it, I'd probably be doing something different right now. Maybe
Might be doing something. No, you'd still be doing hosting.
What happens? So how do you work with your practices to actually make sure they're creating goals that they can actually get done?
Yep, absolutely. So a couple of themes have to happen when you think about this. And the first theme is to think about the time of year that you are in your annual cycle. Okay. So some businesses, our quarter runs November, December, January. Okay. Some businesses over this quarter are really quiet. Think about the retirees or the over 55s. They have to get their work done. Then they run straight into Christmas. It's school holidays. This period is quiet. Think about a different set of clients and a different business. January is the biggest month of the year for inquiries and goal setting and all of this, because it's a younger generation that uses New Year's resolutions, for example. And so you have to understand in your whole 12 months, what type of quarter is this? Is this a busy client quarter or a quiet client quarter? So that's the first thing you have to decide, because that's going to drive how many goals you take on over the next 90 days. And so what the businesses that fail, Craig, fail to understand that they're going to be busy in their BAU, then they fail to understand that they bring on too many goals in the quarter. Okay. So typically less is more. And so the idea that you had one goal and you got it done and you did really well is much better than having three and then only doing a third of all three. Okay. So less is typical more through that process. And so making sure that we've got less goals and we're going to do them really well. Then the next thing that I talk about is setting yourself up for success. And so setting yourself up for success, it's a stretch target, but you need to complete the goal in the 90 days. And so how do you do that? Is you just make the goal achievable. And so it's funny because it's like you can do your goals if you just make them basic enough to get them done within the time period. And that is called what done looks like. So it's very simple. What do you want to have done over the next 90 days to have that goal finished? And if it's a bit more complicated, you're always dividing the goal into 2 or 3 or 4 anyway. It takes a long time to do complicated things in your business. And so making sure you've scoped the goal appropriately, that you can do it in 90 days, defined really well what done looks like. And then at the end of the day, it is identifying the milestones or the little steps that we need to do to set us up for success along the way. And I do love the idea of then blocking out your calendar for just 1 hour a week for the 12 weeks of doing on the goal. And so most people, reason why they're not getting them done, Craig, is they skip out the 1 hour a week for 12 weeks and don't commit that time to that one goal.
Yeah, and mate, it's then all the other techniques that I know you've taught me along the way. Even when then you got that hour in your diary, you're doing it. Chuck in some Pomodoro with that. Get your focus right. Use that time properly and actually get it done.
Yeah, and ask yourself. I did this morning. I have a task that I'm doing, and I said to myself, I wonder how much I can get done if I just did it for an hour. And so normally when we're getting distracted, all these other things are going on. So if you can ask yourself the question, I wonder how much I can get done in the hour, which is 2 Pomodoro sprints and a break. I put these headphones on. So literally I was like in the zone. I listened to the same song for an hour, which song is private for today. But I listened to the song over and over in order to get that work done. And so that's the effort to do the goal within the period of time. And so the last interesting thing that we raise with the businesses, and it's good for you to take through with your team, is this idea of having a goal buddy. So when you've got the goals in the businesses, they're businesses' goals. And so most of the time, Craig, we don't want to give goals to our admin staff because it's difficult for them to prioritize doing the goal and doing today's work, which is important for today's client, kind of thing. So we need to be aware that it can be difficult to pass goal responsibility all the way down the business, but absolutely you can have a goal buddy, which you take on the journey with you. Okay. So you taking someone on the journey with you means they're doing a little bit of work, you're doing a little bit of work, but you're ultimately responsible for the progress. But lots of the jobs could be done together with someone so that they can help you along the way.
Yep, and it makes complete sense. And I think if anyone's listening live or watching this on LinkedIn after, in the comments, I want guesses about what that one song was that Dean is listening to. I'll kick it off with You're So Vain, and we'll see what else we can create.
You can see what look, I'm happy to put it in the chat after we get. Let's see if we can get 5 guesses along the way. We'll see how we go. It's a test for who's listening to the end.
And mine's not a guess. That's not counted in the 5. That's just a fun co-host who stab at someone that's probably not even true. But the song might be about you. Who knows? Anyway, let's go for the last one, mate, which I think is important. So you're doing all of these things. You actually need to tell the people who work in your business about it. And I love the quarterly state of the company.
Yeah,
absolutely. I like the title of that, like where that's going. And so why don't you take us through to wrap this up on actually then telling people in your business what's going on?
Correct. So what happens if you think about your team is the team just see you out of the office for the day. That's what they see. They go, oh, Dean's doing quarterly planning again, kind of thing. And so you're away and your emails build up and you don't get back to your team and things like that. And so the reality, though, is that you've taken the necessary time to work on your business. But the missing piece of this puzzle is that we don't conclude and feed this back to our teams. And so this is the state of the company talk that it's not long, but it's really important to do within the first week once quarterly planning is complete. So you might do quarterly planning, couple of days, you've got to clean things up and make sure you've defined the goals, et cetera, and then you're going to talk to your team. And the discussion that you're having with the team is telling them about the last 90 days. So you're saying, hey team, over the last 90 days, we brought on these number of clients, we hit this revenue goal, we got our processes, we got this number of SOAs, the backwards looking, going, how well did we do over the last 90 days? And you've got to have the data to be able to tell that story, obviously, but that's a key reflective, and you're reflecting on the goals for the quarter. Then what you're doing is with the team is you're just predicting the next 90 days. So we've done the work this is what's happening over the next 90 days that we're working on as a result, and letting them know what help you'll need through that journey. So sometimes you're letting them know what the goals are and say, these are pretty big goals, so I need some extra help or time to be able to work on them. So I need someone in my team to do something to help me, for example. So you're letting them know that the help that's required, and then you're letting them know what numbers you're targeting over the next 90 days as well. And so that lets you communicate the pulse of the theme. Sorry, the pulse of the quarter. So you're saying it's going to be a busy client quarter. Hey, we didn't do a lot of goals. We're not planning to do a lot of client goals. Or you can say it's really quiet, so we've got to do our goals this quarter because we're busy later on. So there's always kind of that theme of the pace of which you might be working on over the 90 days as well. And so if it's a quiet quarter, we're saying we're going to wrap up our work by the 10th of December. Have 2 weeks working on the business. Early Jan, we've got a lot of time to work on the business, and then it's the end of the quarter. And so that's typically, this quarter is a good time to get business work done. Other businesses don't have that ability and they do it in a different quarter. But the state of the company discussion is key, Craig, to make sure that everyone is fully aware of what you did achieve in the last 90 days and then what the business is planning to achieve over the next.
Yep. And just one last question on that thing, because the question I used to get a lot from practice principals was, how much data do I actually share in something like that? Like, I'm not sure I feel comfortable about showing the profit number or this or that. What's the right level to share, and and I'm sure it's horses for courses. What could be one business is different to another, but do you have a general?
My general rule is for your local team here in Australia, like if we think about, we've got different teams in different countries sometimes, I would say generally speaking, your local team already knows. Okay. Yeah. They know all your clients. They know, because they do SOAs, what you charge them. So they can do one times the other and know that you generate $1 million in revenue. It's not that hard. And then subsequent to that, Craig, they also know their salary. They know how many people are in the office, and so they can do that. Wages is the biggest cost in the financial planning business. So it's important for you to know that your team already know your revenue and your expenses, back of the envelope style. So therefore, you might as well give them a bit more meat so they don't have to calculate it themselves.
Yep.
And that gives you the opportunity to start to talk about why it's important that businesses make profit, and profit gets reinvested, profit repays debt, profit goes to shareholders for all the time and effort in building a business. That's a good conversation to have with good people over time.
Yep. No. Spot on, mate. And I think that's a nice way to wrap it up. Dean, that was number 95, which happened to come after 96, but it means we're on the way to 100. And when you talk about accountability buddies, this is something we've held each other accountable to for a while. And I think number 97 you're doing with a guest, but we are going to make our way to 100 by the end of this calendar year, which, exciting from some of those things you spoke about in terms of setting a goal, making it achievable, and then having an accountability buddy in each other and working together to get there. So you've shared some great tips today. For anyone listening along, if you want to talk about them, as always, we're both available. Drop us a line or give us a shout, and we're always happy to help and point people in the right direction. But mate, I love 95. That was a very informative, nice.
Would have been great as 96 as well, but that's the way it rolls. So thanks everyone. We'll see you next week as we squeeze everything in before Christmas. It is a busy time for us. I look forward to chatting with you next week as well. Cheers.
Bye.